13 is a very difficult number to use for a calendar. We want everything as humans to be very symmetrical and even.
Hello, everyone. I am Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspired podcast. Welcome back to a new episode. I want to remind you that several weeks ago we joined Gnostic TV. So all these episodes, you can find them on this platform. We are not on YouTube anymore, just the teasers and the clips that we promote prior to the full interviews being released. My guest today is Athen Chimenti, and I would like to welcome you for this episode.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Claudiu. It's great to be on.
And I would like to start right away by asking you what triggered your spiritual awakening?
Well, I was a very objective person, let's say. Before that, very much into the hard sciences. And if you were to bring up something like astrology to me back then, I would just be like, pseudoscience, whatever. But I was always someone who was into personal growth, though. And on my personal development journey, I, of course, eventually ended up with not ended up, but, found meditation and spending more time meditating. And at this time, I was actually living in a homestead pretty far removed from society. I was living out in Death Valley in the middle of the desert there in a small little house there. And spending a lot of time alone with a lot of empty space, a lot of silence, and just got really deeper into my presence and meditations. And you could say leading to types of spiritual awakenings. But in those states, I got to a point where I realized, sort of consciously that there is, of course, so much more than just what we can perceive with our five senses. And that then led me to other mediums. I got into, astrology, but also things like tarot and numerology, and just started really to dive deep into these realms that I'd completely pushed off before. But astrology was the one that stuck with me because it's still very objective. You can go out and literally see it and verify it and really put it to test and solidify practically in life. So I think that's the reason that one stuck the most. But yeah, ever since then, it really appealed to me in a way of both describing the world we live in, which I was always into, but now from a perspective that I think is so helpful because there's all this spiritual growth and spiritual development that I think is not utilized, let's say, as much as we can in modern society.
So, in other words, living on a homestead maybe helped you to see the sky as it is and free of light pollution, as we are all encountering in the cities.
Yeah, exactly. I had the Milky Way right there. It was pretty intense. At first, I thought it was just some atmospheric distortion or something. But no, that's a ton of stars there. And yeah, it's very, very meditative, but also very enlightening. Yeah, very spiritual.
And how is the sky-based system different from either the Vedic or traditional astrology?
Right. So most of us would think that, astrology is using the visible sky. So if I was to say someone's sun in Cancer or sun in Leo, we would assume that the sun was in that constellation when they were born, right? But the truth is that in mainstream astrology, especially in the West, the sun is usually not in the position that they say it is. Sometimes it can be, but the point here is that mainstream astrology doesn't use the visible sky. What they're using in the West is a seasonal system, which is basically taking the seasons and extrapolating the zodiac wheel on top of that. So, for example, you've got the spring equinox, which starts the zodiac in seasonal or mainstream tropical astrology. So that means that as soon as the sun enters, so as soon as we're in the day of the spring equinox, or at the end of March, that's the first day of Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. That's the first beginning of the zodiac wheel. And it'll stay that way fixed for the end of time using that seasonal tropical system because, of course, we're in the seasons. However, the sun doesn't actually return to the same place, the exact same place every year. It's very subtle. It's only 1 degree every 72 years. So 1 degree out of a 360-degree sky or circle, only 1 degree every 72 years. So it's very subtle. But when this mainstream system started getting really prominent, which was about 2,000 years ago, it was matched. It was the spring equinox during, the sun was actually in Aries during the spring equinox. But fast forward to 2,000 years later, where we are today, and you've got almost that full sign difference. And with using the actual size of the constellations, which is what I also practice, up to 2 signs difference. So, for example, you might actually think you're a Scorpio, but you're actually a Virgo 2 signs before. Not always, not every Scorpio, but it can be that extreme at times. So, long story short, mainstream astrology doesn't use the visible sky. Back then, 2,000 years ago, they created this what's called tropical system, this mainstream system, because it did make sense at the time. It made sense to simply use the seasons because it was matched. It made sense. And so to simplify things, they said, all right, let's just use the seasons then. But the problem is we've been doing that through the Dark Ages, through the Middle Ages, and now today. And we're still using what I believe is a potentially outdated system. I still think it's accurate. I still think it's very accurate to use a seasonal system, but me personally, I don't link it too much with astrology being of the stars. I link it more with another medium, which is more seasonal based medium.
Yeah, and I think what you say makes sense, especially with the latest scientific discoveries. People started to, or scientists started to research the even more in depth the pyramids, the stone circles all over the world, and they realized that they were built based on star positioning from 2,000 years ago, and now they are a little bit off. And that's another solid proof that what you are saying is true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they were using the visible sky at the time, and so everything being very accurate at that time. But yeah, I think throughout these Middle Ages, and these are times when we started to live more indoors, we're more far removed from nature. We're not sitting around that campfire every night like we used to. I think we've lost touch with the visible sky.
Yes, and a lot of people are talking about a 13-month year, and you also talk about 13 zodiac signs. Are they connected? And if yes, what is the 13 zodiac sign, please?
Right. So they're not directly connected. I mean, I obviously think they're connected synchronistically, that the number 13 is extremely significant, and we see it repeated through nature and of course through these ancients. But we do have 13 months, lunar cycles in a year. That is a fact. So that is the lunar orbit, and that's why, lunar orbit is about 29 days, and we've got these months that are like 31. And so if we were to actually use a zodiacal, or let's say a true sky calendar, or an actual calendar that matches the sky more accurately, we would have every month starting on the new moon, the midway point of the month in the full moon. So that's still about a week, still about a week's time, but like more exactly like a week. It wouldn't be, the 52. Well, it'd still be 52, but it wouldn't be, these 12 months with the 52. So we could definitely have a much more accurate calendar if we're using actual months, because that is what a month was intended to be. A month. It was always intended to be the lunar cycle. But what we're using is basically a very sun-centered calendar. And that's because it is almost exclusively based on the sun, in the sense that, of course, we are starting the year during that solar return, when the sun does return to that same position. Of course, we do have that leap year we have to figure out every 4 years, but for the most part, we are using a solar-based system, except for the fact that we don't actually start the year in any astrologically significant or astronomically significant location. It would be great if we started the year maybe in the winter solstice, or maybe in the spring equinox. I think would make a lot more sense. And then we'd have a much more accurate solar calendar. But, I don't know. We did our best and things got lost along the years. But, I guess as long as we're all using the same calendar from a a calendric sense, it doesn't really matter. But of course, from an astronomical sense, it'd be much better if we were using that visible sky again. But the 13th sign is an actual constellation that was removed from the zodiac. And I think it's for that same reason. 13 is a very difficult number to use for a calendar. We want everything as humans to be very symmetrical and even. Imagine having a 13-hour clock. It would be very difficult to use these quarters that are so convenient, these halves that are so convenient, and all of this. So it makes sense to remove it from calendars and clocks. And that's what I think happens back when it was removed. So we have evidence of course, so it's called a fucus, the 13th sign. We have evidence of a fucus being used through these ancients, as you said, through their depictions on the walls in Egypt and all this. But where we see a fucus being left out was during the Babylonian simplifying of the zodiac, sort of pre-Babylonian actually, so Assyrian sort of times. But that's basically when we started inventing calendars and clocks. So I'm a firm believer that there was no intention to remove a fucus from the zodiac. The intention was just simply to make a simplified calendar and a simplified clock, just to make everything evenly divisible for like the seasons, right? It makes sense. And that's where life really revolved around the seasons back then with travel and agriculture and everything. So it made total sense, but I don't think that that was ever intended to be used astrologically or or astronomically, which again, these two things were basically the same back then. So we have evidence of calendars where they removed this 13th sign. The problem is that we continued to use these 12 zodiacs for astrology. And then, of course, in that form of astronomy after that too, which now leaves us to this sign that no one's heard of and us trying to rediscover it and figure out what the heck it's really about. And it is an extremely powerful constellation. Speaking of the Milky Way, that is where the Milky Way crosses over the ecliptic, so the path of the sun. So we've got the path of the sun, which is the path of the planets for the most part as well. We see them visually in the sky. And then that Milky Way band, the center of our galaxy, cuts right through the ecliptic in a fucus. And so this is very much dealing with transformation. It's an extremely energetic point of the sky. We could think of our galactic center as the sun of our galaxy, in which all things are revolving around in this galaxy. And whenever we see planets passing over that, we see a tremendous amount of energy, a sort of transformation, a death and a rebirth that comes out the other side when we're dealing with those transits.
So is there any trend or desire for the 13th zodiac to be included, or is based on each astrologer's preference and how he was taught?
Well, I mean, the number of astrologers using a fucus is so few. I mean, it's like 99.99. So the ones using a fucus are what we coin sort of true sidereal astrologers or astronomical astrologers, right? So that's what I do, and then there's obviously others in the community too, but we are such black sheeps in the community that we would never think that an astrologer is ever even making this decision. I was an astrologer before getting into the true sidereal zodiac, the actual constellations, and it's just it never crossed my path. I mean, until I started using true sidereal. So it's not really a question. Now, of course, astrologers have now heard about it because for the past 20 years, people like me have been making a lot of noise, and it's definitely entered the mainstream through articles and thankfully to the internet. But when they hear about it, they're aware that it's this extra constellation, but they don't consider it a zodiac sign. Again, because it's really not traditionally. And there is merit to that. Because really, if you look at a fucus, it's by the way, it's the serpent bearer, and the serpent is really that energy of transformation, which we see again that the ancients have shown us. But if you look at the constellation, it's a man or a woman holding a serpent, standing on top of Scorpio. So Scorpio literally wraps below the serpent bearer, and then the serpent bearer is on top. And what's quite crazy is that they're actually almost exactly the same width relative to the ecliptic. So they cross the ecliptic at different points. And that's why if you look at one of my charts, it shows Scorpio first and then Ophiuchus, because with astrology, we're really only concerned with the ecliptic, the actual band of the planets that the planets pass through. So they pass through at different times, but the actual constellations share the same part of the sky. So this is the eighth part of the sky. The eighth house in astrology is what they're associated with. So it's a dual sign. It does make sense to remove it if you want to simplify things. Because when we're dealing with astrology, something that shares the same part of the sky is essentially the same energy. Now, mind you, we have 12, traditionally 12 parts of the sky in astrology, 12 signs. And as you go through one sign, you are evolving that sign. So the beginning of Aries is different from the end of Aries, right? Because we're going through an evolution of Aries through Aries, even through that one sign. That's true for, of course, the whole spectrum of the sky or the zodiac. So what Ophiuchus is really what you might call a higher octave of Scorpio. So Scorpio, for those that know, is that deep, raw, real, transformative energy. But Ophiuchus passes the ecliptic after Scorpio. So this would then mean that, just like with any sign, the later part of a sign is the more evolved. That's not really the right word, but the further along in the evolutionary chain or evolutionary sort of progression of things is Ophiuchus from Scorpio. So we would say then that Ophiuchus, being the serpent bearer, is the healer. And it's about working with the Ophiuchus, the Scorpio energy. So Scorpio unveils the deeper world. Scorpio unearths all this hidden stuff. And then Ophiuchus is the one who works with it. And that's what we see astrologically as well. Charts that have a sun in Ophiuchus or an Ophiuchus rising, they tend to be either in medical professions or they're healers or they're spreading deep truth. They're essentially working with that deeper scorpionic energy.
Interesting, because I'm a Scorpio, and for sure I would like to see the Ophiuchus energy or be told about this aspect of my zodiac sign with the touch of Ophiuchus, and that would be great, especially for those in my sign. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, of course, there's, more than the sun sign, but, what's your birthday?
November the 2nd, 1969.
Okay, so believe it or not, but in true sidereal, so using the actual placement of the sun, you are one of those examples where the sun was actually in Virgo. So your sun was right in between Virgo and Libra. Okay. Now, like I said, you might have other Ophiuchus energy. You could have your Mercury, Venus, Mars there, other planets, your ascendant. There's more than just the sun sign. But if we are going by just your sun, the sun was, well, let's say, right in between Virgo and Libra. So you're likely to be a little bit of a blend of both. Now, what the sun represents is the view of life. So here we would say that you view life both through an improvement-oriented lens, how you can strive towards improvement, getting into the details of things, striving towards perfection, but at the same time, also fairness and balance. So Libra is about viewing life in the sense of viewing two sides of the coin or two sides of a situation and being able to view the middle or the center point between a lot of these things. So that can sometimes be also a view around what's right and just and things like that, but essentially what's balanced in life. So this is the view of life. Of course, then if you had something in Ophiuchus, would maybe represent something else like how you think or how you communicate. But the sun being your sort of vital life force, yeah, the sun was actually right in between Virgo, the maiden, and Libra, the scales.
Nice, thank you. And how does the moon come into the equation of astrological equation? Is that important?
Equally as important as the sun. So just like when you go outside and you see the two prominent luminaries, the sun and the moon, so they're the largest bodies in the sky. That's symbolic for representing the strongest parts of ourselves, right? So the sun is the yang consciousness, the outer part of ourself, the part that is shining. So it's like a light. It's viewing life in the outer world. The moon is the inner consciousness. Okay, so this is the more the hidden, the private, the part that comes through more at home and in your private life, but both equally important. And it, again, synchronistically, very interesting that the sun and moon are the relatively, for the most part, the same size in the sky, even though they're completely different distances away, supposedly. So this is symbolic for them being equally important. And then the other planets, of course, then are smaller, and so they represent smaller parts of the self. And even more distant ones then represent deeper parts of the self. So you would kind of just go in order in terms of proximity to, the sky, in terms of prominence. And the further out you get, the further into the psyche. So you start with very conscious, outer and inner consciousness, the sun and moon, and then you go as far as, Uranus and Neptune or Pluto, which are unseen to the eye, to the naked eye, which represent the unseen forces of the self. And that's where you can really get into the unconsciousness, Jungian psychology, shadow work, things on that deeper level.
Yeah, this work is fascinating, and I had I think two or three other astrologers on the channel, and some of them are traditional, some are Vedic, and they all bring something new to the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hats off to all the Vedic astrologers out there. I have to give the shout out that they did stay true to the visual sky. Okay. So in the East, now they're still using the 12 signs. So they don't use a fucus. And they also use an even 30 degrees for all of the signs. Um, Even though the constellations are different sizes. So for example, Virgo is very large, whereas Libra is very small, for example. This is the actual visual constellations that we use here. So even though that Vedic uses 30 degrees for all of them, so they're stretching and shrinking the constellations, they have a much deeper system within that zodiac system. So within their zodiac, they have what are called nakshatras and padas, which are further divisions of the zodiac. And here's where they start to get into the actual stars, which again would then mean you're using true sidereal. You're using the actual constellations because you're getting into the actual stars as part of different constellations than the zodiac sign. So, anyways, had to make that shout out because even though it is a traditional mainstream system with even 30 degrees, for those that get into nakshatras and padas, you are using the visible sky. So, in that sense, true sidereal has sort of stayed alive, let's say, traditionally through Vedic teachings.
Yes, and in fact, I heard that all the billionaires are using astrologers when they make their decisions, while in public they bash this approach. Is that
Yeah,
true?
they don't want the masses to use astrology. They just give us the crumbs, right? So yeah, you guys continue to use this tropical or whatever mainstream. It's great, but it's great. Like I said, so I don't want to bash on so
Yeah.
tropical is what we're using in the West. That's the one that's like up to 2 signs different. It's very different. That's the sun sign and everything everyone's used to. I still think it's accurate. I just think that it's showing a more physical part of the self. Because when you think about what it is, it's taking the zodiac and it's putting it over the seasons, which means that the seasons is very much like the way the Hindus might call it. It's like the sort of karmic wheel. It's kind of like the static wheel. It never changes. And so it represents the very physical, denser parts of existence or the physical parts of the self. And so it is still very accurate, in terms of like you probably associate a lot with Scorpio, and I associate a lot with my Aquarius mainstream sign too. So there's a lot of these qualities we see, but what you'll likely see as for those that explore true sidereal is that tropical is a very physical part of the self, and that there's a deeper self within that. So still great to see like the physical self, physical appearances, and a lot of the physical life experiences through tropical. It's great for that. But for that deeper soul, spiritual self, basically where the planets actually were, it is great to use the visible sky, the true sky. So yeah, the elite or whatever definitely don't want everyone to know that true self. I think they're okay, even though they still bash on astrology a lot anyways with the religious science we have today. I think they definitely don't want the masses to have that inner self knowing, that true sidereal or maybe other forms of astrology can provide.
Yes, it's like when they say don't buy gold or silver because it's not money, but behind the scenes they go into, yeah, that's exactly the opposite.
It's about control, right? It's survival of the fittest, let's say, and they're in a position of power, so you know, that's where the cream rises, I guess.
Yeah. Athens, I saw on your website that you mentioned that we shouldn't read our monthly horoscope. Why is that?
Well, it's not that I don't think, we shouldn't. I mean, I see value in, like I said, tropical as well. It's just that we have to be careful when we do it because it's, again, very limited. So not only is tropical, again, just the physical self, but the horoscopes, if we're talking about mainstream horoscopes, it's really the sun sign, the tropical sun sign exclusively. And so if we kind of limit ourselves and put ourselves in a box and say, identify as this, we really limit our experience. And so it's important to recognize, and this is true for all forms of astrology, not just tropical, that it's important to realize we're the whole zodiac. And we want to be very careful not to identify too much with one particular sign or one particular thing, because it really then starts to limit our experience. Our true self is the entire zodiac, right? We're operating, our true self is operating in the center of the zodiac wheel, let's say. So we don't want to get too narrow. We want to narrow that band of consciousness. We want to expand that band of consciousness as much as possible. And horoscopes are great as long as we're aware we're viewing it through that smaller band, maybe for entertainment, maybe for fun, maybe just for a little bit of, clarity on a situation. But very important to take a look at, of course, the rest of the chart for more of the physical self and the growth of the other parts of the spiritual self. And then hopefully at the end of the day, stop using astrology altogether because, ideally, astrology is great to only get us so far, but I don't believe it's something that we need. It's a tool, and tools are obviously useful. But at the end of the day, I think connecting with that true self or connecting that presence, God, source, whatever, is really the whole journey here. But astrology can certainly help us do that. And anything that does help us do that, I think is great. And the horoscopes can still help us do it.
So in other words, let's look at the big picture and don't consider or put much weight on the details of the monthly horoscope, pretty much.
Yeah, and try not to identify too much with the sign. It's
Yeah.
easy for the ego to identify, I'm this, I'm a doctor, I'm good at golf or whatever. And these things are great. And having a healthy ego is very important. So long as we remain flexible and open-minded and growing, along the journey.
Yeah, thank you. Ethan, I want to ask you a question that I think everyone is very eager to hear the answer to. What should we expect for the remaining of 2024 and 2025 in terms of world events and good or less good, or give us what you can think will entertain us at this point?
Yeah. So again, as you can probably tell by my language, I don't believe in predicting the future. I don't believe that like our future has been predetermined and we're just sort of going through the motions of living this life that's already pre-programmed. We are, of course, co-creating this future, and so what we're seeing with astrology is just where we're at in certain cycles. Just like we can say that in the winter it's good for certain things, and certain things in the winter are more likely to happen, right? Especially when we're talking about gardening and things like this. So that's how I see astrology too. It's just telling us where we're at in the cycles of things, and the planets are just telling us where we are at in these larger cycles of life. So with that being said, we can see, yes, where maybe there's some higher probabilities and just what the general themes are. So a lot of what we've experienced this year is actually quite significant, okay, from a big picture standpoint. One is that Pluto, which is that deepest part I was talking about, and again, this now represents the collective when we view it for humanity like this. It's the planet of transformation and change. And it's the deepest part of us that really wants to transform and change things. So anyways, Pluto has been entering into Capricorn. Capricorn is the constellation of structures, systems, in a societal sense, governments, economic systems, companies, corporations, basically everything that forms a sort of bedrock of society in terms of what we build. So I don't know if I need to say much, but you've got the planet of transformation going into the structures. And the last time this happened was actually in the late 1700s. So for those that are history buffs or know about like American history, 1776 was actually when Pluto started to enter Capricorn. And this is when we saw not only the United States start their revolutions, and we basically went from monarchies being dominant in the West to then republic and democratic forms of government becoming more prominent again. But we also saw the rest of Europe do it. And of course, Asia had their own transformations as well. But, we went through revolution and we went through a complete restructuring of forms of government and systems, even the economic systems, mercantilism and everything else. So I am expecting similar. Now, of course, not as bloody. It's with all this fear mongering and all this stuff, it's very easy to get caught up into these end of the world situations and stuff. We've grown a lot as humanity, and it's important to realize that even though these are cycles, again, we're spiraling. We're not returning to that same point. The whole solar system, if you believe it, is flying through space. And if you look at that, it's not the 2D solar system we're taught in school. It's a spiral. You have a ball in the center of the sun flying through space, and these other planets sort of trailing behind it, spiraling around it. This is symbolic for evolution. So it's important to realize that even though Pluto's returning to the same place it was in the late 1700s, we are growing and spiraling in a more higher, more evolved way. So, but I still think it's going to be around creating change in our systems and structures of society. Pluto will be here for about 18 years. It's really just starting a new cycle. Again, this is like 250 years cycle with this stuff. We can see how far we've come the past 250 years, and we're now starting essentially a new cycle with this kind of energy again. So big time there. And I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but really good to see that we, again, don't want to get too attached or fixated on current systems and structures. It's very important, I think, for everyone to be open to change, being open to changing things, not to become too dependent either on the systems that we've built these past 250 years, and start to empower our own lives and transform our own lives in powerful ways. And this is where the personal development side of astrology comes in, because we all have Pluto and Capricorn somewhere in our charts, and that somewhere is helping us transform our own systems and structures. Also coinciding with Pluto is Uranus, the planet of innovation and change, and Jupiter, the planet of expansion, are going into Taurus. So this is significant, not as significant as the 250-year Pluto, but 84, 85-year Uranus. So the last time Uranus did this was about 84, 85 years ago. But anyways, significant in that Taurus represents the earthy things like Capricorn. It's another earth sign, but more specifically, the material values of life. So societally, it rules things like money, what we value, what we consider money, resources in general, commodities, gold, silver, you mentioned it, anything with tangible hard assets, anything of real tangible physical value, and also nature and the natural world as well. So we have this innovative energy coming in here. And so this one's for about the next 10 years. And so what I'm expecting, I was actually expecting it already this year, but I guess maybe with some of the stuff with the elections or whatever is being postponed, but I am expecting a lot of revolutionary changes with the financial situation, industry in general. So we're already seeing it obviously with crypto and things like that. And of course, we're seeing it with, central banks talking about implementing, digital currencies. But this is a revolution to fundamentally what we value, what we consider valuable. So good to be open to change here. Revolutionize our own lives when it comes to money and resources, how we approach it, what we value, what we consider valuable. Again, change from what we've been normally doing with money and all this the past 84 years. Be open to change and innovative things. And also, getting more in touch with nature too, and becoming more self-reliant, because that's perhaps the deepest part of Taurus. It's really about the inner resources and inner values. So really revolutionizing also how we cultivate the earth, and because really money and all this is just a symbol, just a representation of material goods and then, services. So it's this really reconnecting to nature in a way that's discovering what we truly value and perhaps starting to work with nature in a more constructive way than we have before. So in our personal life, becoming more self-reliant, maybe growing our own food, things like this. And then societally as well, of course, becoming more natural in general with our food, our diets, revolutionizing things on a natural sense can also be very significant. So again, that's going to be about the next 10 years, coinciding with the Pluto. Again, quite significant with what we're seeing, I think, being major changes with the structures. And then in this case, probably, we're going to see it the most with the economic. Saturn has also been in Aquarius the past 2 years. This actually coincided perfectly with the whole AI thing. So if we look at Saturn's cycle, 29-year cycle, you can follow this through history. Every 29 years with Saturn's cycle, with him being in Aquarius, we go through a new cycle with technology. So the last time Saturn entered Aquarius, which by the way, he's already been here for a couple of years. So Saturn started to enter in 2022, and that's really when the AI stuff really started to take off in the mainstream. But the last time Saturn started to enter Aquarius was in the early to mid 90s, around 94, 95. And that's when we really started to see the major adoption of the internet. So before that, it wasn't real internet, but 94, 95, that's when we started to get into chat and email, and like really the internet started to take form. And in many ways, what that means is that since we've been ending that 29 years, we're also ending that cycle of the way we've been using the internet. So the next 29 years, again, started a couple of years ago, is really the new way of utilizing not just the internet, but technology in general. I'm just really using the internet as an example, but technology in general. But with the internet, yeah, I mean, what we're likely to see is, I think, the death of a lot of ways we've been using the internet, okay? And at the same time, a rebirth of new ways of using it, which, because it coincided so much with the AI, it's very obvious at this point now, 2 years later, that, we're going to see people probably, like, I would say in 29 years. So once this cycle completes, I think we'll probably just see the internet as more of like the same way we look at a library. It's just kind of the back end. It's like you only go there to like research things, It's like if you want to go, murk around in the books, or in this case on the internet, to kind of uncover some hidden stuff, or do some research on something, you really won't need to, because with the AI, it'll just tell you what you need to know. You'll have it conversationally, whatever, in your ear, whatever, and there will be really no reason to go and search things on the internet. So that's really this now new beginning technologically. Again, not just with the internet, but you can see it across many industries. It's really the beginning of this. And again, following it as a 29-year cycle can really give us a good understanding of what we're expecting to see these next 29 years.
Yeah.
So those are the three most significant things. And again, really two of those are concentrated in terms of having started in 2024, with the Saturn one having a couple years already being into it.
Yeah, I agree totally with what you said. And we are due for a financial reset and reset of other structures, government, medical, everything else. And yes, I think certain things were postponed because of these upcoming elections, which they think, and they keep saying that they are the most important in the USA's history. Could be much more than that, to be honest, because can trigger a lot of events worldwide. So we'll see, but definitely we need a reset, the personal level, get prepared mentally, psychologically, spiritually. And that's why this channel and similar ones are trying to prepare the masses, the people, to get ready for what's coming.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah.
And Athen, in the past, when someone associated the astrology and the esoteric with the mysticism, and I recently been interviewed by Lou Martin on his channel Awakened Spirits Network, and when he posted the interview, he characterized me as an author and mystic. And to be honest with you, I was taken aback by the mystic label, and I put more thought into it to see why he did that. And what I came up with is that if one keeps an open heart to God's love and light, has gratitude for the human experience he or she is living right now in the moment, loves and respects his sisters and brothers and life in general, including plants, animals, insects, have common sense and humbleness, and last but not least, desire to know thyself. And when all these checkbox or boxes are checked, one can be considered a mystic. What do you think?
I never thought of it that way. I would say it's what I hope we can all strive towards. And really, I think that's the healthy life. I kind of see it from like that's the healthy life, living in balance like that, and not being pulled to either extreme, because I think it's the polarities of life, the yin and the yang, those extremes where, yeah, things get done and there's a lot of growth and progress, but it's also where when we live out of balance like that, that's really where disease happens and unhealthiness happens, both personally and collectively. So yeah, thinking of it in terms of the mystic, I would say that's probably what the shamans were in our past, right? Helping everyone be healthy and helping everyone live a more centered and balanced life, to connect to nature, to connect to God, and to try to learn more about themselves. These are all interconnected. I can say from my own experience, they all came at the same time. It was during the time I wanted to know more about myself, was the same time I had more love for humanity and nature, and was the same time I became spiritual and all this. So that's really interesting, you putting it like that. I'll have to sit with it more, but just off the top of my head, I mean, yeah, that's I think what we are all striving towards. I think is life is striving towards that, and yeah, that's a very healthy and balanced way to live. And I hope we can continue to strive towards that as humanity. And I hope more of us go down that path.
Thank you. And let's talk more about your programs. What else can you offer?
Yeah, so it's all on the website. So the website's masteringthezodiac.com, or you can just search it into a search engine, Mastering the Zodiac. We've got courses, we've got weekly horoscopes, we have articles we publish every week, readings. But what I do recommend everyone start with is just view the sky. So on the website is a calculator. You just type in your birth details. Even if you don't know your time of birth, it's fine. There's a version for that. Just type in your birth details and you'll see the sky visually when you're born. We also have a sky view, so you can actually see it visually and kind of drag it like a planetarium, but of course also the chart in astrological form. Below that is a description of the three most prominent parts of the personality. So the sun, like we talked about, the moon, like we talked about, and then also the ascendant, which is the life path or what life's really helping us develop in this life, and see if it resonates. If that resonates, then I can offer a discount for everyone listening at 50% off the full report. So it's a full-on 12-page report going through all of the different placements of the personality. And I'm happy to give your audience 50% off. So if you go to masteringthezodiac.com/report-discount, that's report-discount, or I can give you the link, Claudiu, if you'd like. But yeah, if you resonate with the mini report, that's 50% off the full report. But that's a great place to start. You'll really not learn anything new about yourself, but you'll get a greater sense of confirmation. And that confirmation gives a lot of clarity and a lot of direction, a lot of conviction with things. But yeah, along with that, readings, if you want more detailed analysis, videos, learning, educational stuff, it's all there on the website at masteringthezodiac.com.
Thank you. Definitely will share the link, and will encourage my audience to check it out. Athen, we are approaching the end of this wonderful discussion. Any final thoughts?
No, just love what you're doing, and yeah, I appreciate being on, and I hope we can continue to have these kinds of discussions in the public in general, and yeah, sharing our perspective, hopefully towards growth and personal development, and like you said, going down that mystic journey, I think is extremely important. But yeah, thank
Yes,
you for having me on.
we all need it. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, leave a comment. Don't forget, We are on Gnostic TV. You can also check all previous interviews on www.spiritualinspired.ca. And until next time, love and gratitude.